So, good morning, everybody. B'ezrat Hashem. Today's lesson should help us move closer to Dar. And we know Dar is a time for Simcha, to go up and joy. These last few months are ones of Bitul, ones of trying to, so to speak, experience the darkness of life and to be able to connect to something deeper. And Adar is the time that we're actually able to open up and to see that, to the extent that the sages teach us that this is the month that we go up in joy and Simcha. Rabbi Nachman and the Chazal, they explain that Adar is actually a preparation as well for Pesach. That only through Adar can we get to Pesach. We know that Pesach is representative of Geula, of redemption, and like we spoke about last night, Adar represents the end of history, represents the final generation for the coming of the Mashiach, represents the time right before Pesach. In the concealment, alluded to by Esther, that we know that Esther, her name means concealment. It means what's hidden. It's the Aleph of Esther. That Esther is the, and Hashem is concealed. So we should all see in zchut of these lessons that we're able to see through the veneer of the world that makes it appear as if Hashem is not here with us. And as we go into Adar, that Hashem should have rachamim on us and help us to see even earlier that Baruch Mordechai is the same as Arur Haman, that the bad in our life, the trials and the tribulations, are really only a vehicle to reveal the greatest good. I just want to make sure everybody is with me. Can you guys see me and hear me before I move forward? Give me like a thumbs up or a little chat, something in the chat, just to say that you guys can hear it.
I don't know if it's just me, but I cannot see. No video. Yeah, I'm not the only one. Thank you guys. You made it person.
Okay, 1 second. Tell me how it is now. Can you guys see me now?
No, still nothing. Unless others can see. I can't.
Okay, 1 second. Interesting. Let me just log out and log back in for a second. Me now?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, great. So this should be an intro. 1 second. Okay. So, B'ezrat Hashem, today we're going to finish halacha in Likutey Halachot, which is beautiful, and B'ezrat Hashem move into a brand new one tomorrow. V'zeh shechalam. This is the dream that Tzaddik had. Hinei anachnu ma'almim alumim b'toch hasadeh. That behold, we were binding alumim in the field. The way that they usually translate this as sheaves or binds. Perusho kashar. What is a sheave? A sheave is when you eat, and you bind it all together. You use that in order to harvest agriculture. They had to use to bind the sheaves. So Rav Natan says, this is the Lashon of Kasharim. That is, this signifies constrictions, contractions, because Kashar means something that you tie. So whenever you tie something, like let's say you tie your shoes, what's the point of tying your shoes? You are creating a knot so that you can use your shoes. So too, we're saying that the Ikar of the Tzaddik, of the spiritual master, the one who is able to draw us out of his life and to infuse light into his ability to do so is not just elevated level of spirituality, but specifically that he can tie all of our, that he can bind all of our sheaves, that he can take the revelations of godliness and constrict them so that they are fitting us, so that we can experience them in a way that is healthy, that is beneficial, that is good for us, that is permanent. Shehem bechina kasharim, this is the concept of kasharim, that is bindings, constrictions. Ki tzimtzum bechina kesher, because tzimtzum, a contraction, is a knot. Hainu shekulam oskim bazeh, meaning that all you nim alumim v'sarim etzumtzim k'dei imshoch ayadam has dreamed that all the shvatim were engaged in this. They were all binding aluminum and creating binding and constrictions in order to godliness. However, however, the constrictions in the vessels which Yosef Tzaddik built were much greater and surpassed all of those. One second. You guys are having trouble hearing me? One second. Can you guys hear?
Much better.
Much better. Okay. Yofi. Wow. Okay. You guys should know that whenever there's stuff like this that happens, it means that we're doing something important. Bezrat Hashem, somebody's going to hear something that they need to hear, because the Yetzer Hara is trying hard to break the whole thing up. So we see that Yosef Tzaddik, what does it mean that his bindings were the greatest? It means that he had the greatest constrictions, the greatest vessels. V'hinei kama alumati v'gam nitzava. Like the pasuk says, look, my sheaf arose and even remained standing. Sha'kasher v'atzimtzum shelo kama v'gam nitzava la'al v'netzach. That his binding and constriction arose and even remained standing forever and for all eternity. Now, interestingly, Rabbi Nachman, he said that I have achieved and I will achieve. Now, usually when people pass away, their teachings, so to speak, take on a lesser impact. That as time goes on, so to speak, their connection, their ability to penetrate into the darkness of the Jewish people decreases as time goes on. Their influence lessens. However, Rabbi Nachman told his students that as time goes on, there's going to be an opposite thing that takes place with me, that my impact is going to increase as time goes on, that I have achieved and I will achieve. And he says that my fire is going to burn until Mashiach comes. So too, he's alluding to the fact that, like Yosef at Tzaddik, that his sheaves, his constrictions, not only did they stand, but they will stand, and they will surpass all of his brothers. That they will, it will remain standing until the coming of the Mashiach. שהקשר והצמצום שלא קמה וגם ניצבה לעד לנצח. והנה התסובנה אלומותיכם תשתחוונה לאלומתי. That his binding and construction arose and even remains standing forever, and says, look, your sheaves encircled my sheaf and bowed down to it. What does it mean? That everyone, including the Shvatim, meaning including the Tzaddikim, they actually must receive their perceptions of godliness even through Yosef. That even their sheaves, which they had, they were only getting through the revelations of godliness they got through Yosef. That is by means of the wondrous constrictions that he creates with his profound wisdom, in order that he should be busy bringing back the souls of Jewish people always. So that through this he merited that he merited that even great tzaddikim, that they would need him. They would need his perceptions of godliness. They would need his contractions, his bindings, his sheaves. To perceive perceptions of godliness. Through these contractions. That also they need to receive from him. Rabbi Nachman said many times that the whole world is going to need me. And that my Rosh Hashanah is not just for my students, but everybody benefits from my Rosh Hashanah. Now, all of these statements on paper, they might sound like statements of grandeur. They might sound outrageous. However, when you read the deeper teachings of Kabbalah and Chassidut and the Zohar, you see that there is this concept of a tzaddik, that he arises in every generation or in every time period of history. And he is the root of the souls of the Jewish people, and that even all the tzaddikim, the Arizal said, receives his Torah, receives his God consciousness, his connection and his revelations of Hashem through that soul, that tzaddik. And this has been seen throughout history, that it was the case with Moshe Rabbeinu, that it was the case with Mordechai, which we're learning about now with Purim coming up, that it was the case with Yosef HaTzadik, that it was the case with Boaz, that it was the case with many people as time went on, with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and X, Y, and Z. So this is something which was not created with the coming of the soul, as his name was Nachman. This was a permeation, this was a continuation of a pattern which has taken place over history, that there's always, so to speak, within the brothers of the Jewish people, within all the tzaddikim, there's one who is the bechina of Yosef. That even though on paper he is ostracized and mitigated by his brothers while he's alive, so too he is the one in which that paradoxically they are receiving their perceptions of godliness from. And that even though they are oppressing and mitigating him and his students, at the same time, he is the one ultimately that is going to be holding on to the perceptions of godliness specifically, but Dafka, when the suffering of the Jewish people becomes the greatest. And then everybody's going to need to go to him in order to receive their perceptions, which is what we saw. That even though in the beginning, initially, Yosef is oppressed and he is mitigated and he is stigmatized. However, ultimately, once there's a famine and nobody has perceptions of godliness anymore, and we're all suffering and struggling, and we don't have answers for the difficulties and challenges that come in our generation, then ultimately, regardless of how we feel about Yosef, it doesn't matter anymore, because we have to go to him to get our perceptions. So too, Rabbi Nachman said that in the final generation, before Mashiach comes, everyone is going to need me. That we can see even now that there's no answers for the difficulties and challenges we have in our generation. Whether it's from people who they say is going off the derech, meaning they're losing their connection to Hashem, despite the fact that they went to yeshivas growing up and their parents, succeeded in the way that they wanted to, and making a certain amount and getting their kid in a position, their children in a position to connect, and all of a sudden they find out that their children are dealing with substance abuse, or they have lost their connection and their vitality of Judaism. Or you see, obviously, that the majority of Jewish people in this generation are all secular, that they don't even know what Shabbat is, that they don't even know what the mitzvot are, that they have no connection to Hashem. And the list goes on and on, whether in the religious community or you're in the non-religious community, whether in the Jewish community or the non-Jewish community, everybody's struggling. Everybody's looking for answers. And Rabbi Nachman was hinting to the fact that this was going to be the case. And we see, where is he getting this from? It's really rooted in the story of Yosef. That we know that Chazal hinted to us that there, so to speak, is this Mashiach ben Yosef figure who comes before Mashiach ben David. That there's this figure of the Tzaddik Yesod Olam, who, even though he's mitigated and oppressed by his brothers, and he suffers for everybody, at the same time, ultimately, he's the precursor to the coming of the Mashiach. That it's through his teachings, that it's through his self-sacrifice, that it's through his actually going through these bizayon, these embarrassments, and stigmas. At the same time, it's that exact process that allows the Jewish people to so to speak, transition from the slavery, the ibud, the trials and tribulations of Mitzrayim, of this world, and bring us into the coming of the Mashiach, the Geula. Ki shelo olel al kulam. The idea is that the tzaddik's perceptions and constrictions rise above everyone's else. It's expressed in what we say on Shabbat, that is from Mishlei, where it says, Rabot banot asu chayo va'at alit al kulana. We know that this section of Mishlei we say over, and we call it Eshet Chayil. Now, we know that Chazal, they explain that when Shlomo was speaking about this beautiful woman who is strong and who's valiant and who's dependable, and has so much self-sacrifice, that it's really speaking about the Torah. And we know that the Kabbalists, they explain that on a deeper level, that the Eshet Chayil is really speaking about the Shekhinah, that she's with us even in the exile, even in the Galut, that Hashem, so to speak, his female manifestation stays with us in concealment within all of our suffering and never leaves us, and goes through every stage of our life, every period of our life, the positive and specifically those difficulties and those challenges which has been so hard for us to elevate from, that Hashem is with us there in the form of the Shekhinah. And she is the Eshet Chayil. She is the beautiful woman. She is the revelation of godliness. So that is the Torah, that's the Shekhinah. However, we know that according to the Gemara, it says that there's no good beside the Tzaddik. That it says that the Tzaddik, Yeshaya says that the Tzaddik is Tov, is good. And we know that the Torah says that the light, the or is good, is Tov, is good. And we know that the or is always a reference to the Torah. So we see here a very deep connection. That is, that you see that the Torah is considered the only good that there is in this world, meaning the Torah is the revelation of Hashem in the world. And also we see that the Tzaddik is Tov, the Tzaddik is good. So which one is it? Is it the Torah that's good, or it's the Tzaddik that's Tov? So Rabbi Nachman explains in the Likutey Moharan that the whole ikar of the Torah is the Tzaddik. That the essence of the light of the Torah is actually the root of the soul of the Tzaddik himself. And it's revealed through the Torah. So it's not a steer or a contradiction. that, so to speak, the Shekhinah or the Torah or the Tzaddik Emet, or the one who's on the Bechina of Yosef HaTzaddik, it's really all one sugya. So therefore now we're bringing out a further exposition of this Eshet Chayil, that it's really speaking about Yosef. It's really speaking about the Tzaddik Yesod Olam. And that is, many women have excelled, but she surpasses them all, meaning, Shenema al Tzaddik HaEmet, this Tzaddik HaEmet HaGadol, this great, genuine Tzaddik, Beyotar Osek La'asot Kelim, Ulevushim, U'amshich Torah, B'chochma Amitit Kezot. That she's the one who succeeds, meaning this greatest true tzaddik who engages in creating vessels and garments and drawing Torah with such genuine wisdom that everyone can come closer to Hashem through it. Until that everybody's able to come close to Hashem. That's why she called the woman of valor. That what is her valor? What is her strength? What is her koach, her power, that, so to speak, other women don't have, other tzaddikim don't have? That is her ability to get it to everybody, to connect to everybody, no matter where they're holding, whether they've been learning their whole life in yeshivas and beit midrasha, or whether they are as far as possible from Hashem and they never even heard of Shabbat, they never even heard of the mitzvot. That the tzaddik can get to everybody. Now, Rabbi Nachman explains in the Likutey Halachot, this koach of this true tzaddik is that he's able to show what is it specifically that he's able to do, that he's able to get it to the person who already feels that he's so close and the person that already feels so far. So the answer is his ability, paradoxically, to show that wherever that person feels that he's holding, he's actually holding in the opposite state. Meaning that for the person who feels that he's already achieved such a high level, that he feels, so to speak, that he's already so connected to Hashem because he's such a master in learning Torah and keeping the mitzvot, that in the face of reading the teachings, the lessons, the wisdom of the true tzaddik, he feels a type of busha. He feels a type of distance. He feels that, in fact, he has not yet gotten close to Hashem as he thought he had. So to speak, the tzaddik shows him that he's still very far. Now, on paper, obviously, for the majority of us, this would bring us further away from Hashem because we already feel far. But we see that, in fact, it's for those people that they already feel so close. That's actually the cause of their distance from Hashem, because they don't realize that, in fact, they're still very far. And therefore, what they need is to feel that distance, because right now they feel close. Like the Baal Shem Tov used to say, that we need to love all the Am Haaretz. We need to love all the simple Jewish people, because even though they don't know the mitzvot, they genuinely want to be close to Hashem. And at the same time, he says that we should love the Talmidei Chachamim, that we should love those people who learn Torah, and they do it all day and night. So the question is, what do you mean? And we should also love them. Of course we should love them. They're the easiest ones, it's seemingly, to love, because they've sacrificed themselves completely to Hashem. I remember the Baal Shem Tov said that in our generation, he said we should love even the Talmidei Chachamim because they're usually arrogant. Meaning that something's happened over the course of time, that as the generations have gone on, those people, so to speak, have learned Torah at the greatest level, have excelled in this avoda of learning and connecting to Hashem, that along the way, that whole entire occupation has gone into exile. And that we have stopped doing that for the sake of getting close to Hashem only, and it's become, so to speak, a rat race, just like in the secular world, that you see that in the secular world, you have this dog-eat-dog world where everybody's trying to overcome and achieve and power, so to speak, their brother, the one who's with them, to show that I have achieved, that Ani Meloch, I rule in this area. And in fact, the Gemara, it's very clear that what makes the Talmid Chacham is his humility. So too, the essence of the Tzaddik Emet is he's able to humble even the Talmid Chacham, the one who's been learning his whole life and has achieved a very high level of limud Torah. However, on the other hand, for us, those people that we feel so far, and that's the cause of our suffering, that we don't feel close to Hashem, that we feel that He doesn't listen to us, we feel that He's not with us, that He doesn't care about us, that He's not helping us. So the koach of the Tzaddik Emet is that for us, He does the opposite. He shows us that in fact we're very close. And it's this paradoxical nature of the tzaddik that he could show the one who feels that he's so far that he's actually very close, and he can make the one who feels that he's close that he's actually so far. That same tzaddik, through his same lessons, is having an opposite paradoxical effect for everybody who listens to his teachings. So it's that koach, it's that ability that he's the Eshet Chayil. One second. Sorry, I just need to put my phone on. Nobody can contact me. Everyone can still hear me? I just want to make sure before I continue. Can anyone hear? Okay, thank you. Kishelo. So this is what it says right here. Right. So that's the Eshet Chayil. Darsha tzemo fishtin, that she looks for wool and flax. Shehem bechinat kelim ulevushim lasagot elokut. Why is she seeking tzemer and pishtim? That we know that according to the Shulchan Aruch, that the essential ingredients of a garment are flax and wool. So that's the concept we learned before, that a levush, a garment in the Torah, is always the concept of a constriction for the revelation of light. Like we said in the past, that what's the whole essence of clothes? Clothes make it that you're able to reveal yourself, that without clothes, the light of who you are as you are naturally is too intense for people to see in society. And therefore we need to unclothe ourselves so that we can go out and interact with the world. However, this is a paradoxical thing, meaning why am I clothing myself? So that I can reveal myself. I am decreasing the intensity of my essence so that those around me can experience me at a lesser intensity. But it's through that lesser intensity that I can be seen, that I can be heard. Just like with the sun, we need to look at it through sunglasses. So too, so to speak, our physical clothes are like sunglasses to who we really are, so that other people can see us without the intensity being too intense. So too the Torah, which is revelations of godliness, which is connected the light of the sun, we need constrictions for it. So the Torah always speaks about these constrictions in the form of clothing. Therefore, this tzaddik, he is looking for wool and flax, meaning looking for constrictions for the light in which he has received himself to connect to Hashem and to bring others close to him. These are the perceptions of godliness. That is, she is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it's still nighttime, and she brings food for her household. Meaning, meaning that even in the strength of the absolute darkness of the exile, which we are faced now with, that the exile has never been stronger, that the spiritual illness has never been felt in a greater, more intense fashion, and it's felt by everybody, of all the souls of the Jewish people, that it's specifically at that time that she goes to find food for us, meaning that the tzaddik goes to reveal revelations of godliness to us, to draw them down, even though it's most difficult now, and to bring them to us, even though it's hardest to get them to us because of all the barriers, because of all the blockages, because the Sitra Achra right now is strongest right before the coming of the Mashiach. And so for the rest of the praise of the woman of valor, meaning all of the shevach, all of the praise of this Eshet Chal is really about the Tzaddik Yesod Olam. That she is doing this, meaning the Tzaddik is doing this despite the darkness that comes prior to Shabbat, prior to the revelation of the Mashiach, the Geula, that she is going and doing everything that she possibly can to get us food, to get us through this dark, difficult exile. That means that her husband is renowned in the Sha'arim. Her husband is known in the gates. Shem bechinat shi'urin, da'at van deraita. So the Zohar speaks about the fact that her husband is renowned in the Sha'arim, that these Sha'arim, these gates, is alluding to, it's the language, the Lashon of shi'urim, meaning measurements of the letters of the Torah. What does this signify? Hainu bechinat tzimtzumim, the concept of contractions. That what is it that makes the husband, meaning Hashem, known? It is the gates, the sha'ari, meaning the shi'urin, the vessels, the contractions, shehubet mamshich b'chuchmato, that he draws through his deep wisdom. Ayadam noda Hashem yiparach ba'olam, and through this is known Hashem in the world. That's the concept of nada b'sha'arim ba'ala, that the husband is known in the gates, meaning through the shi'urin, through the contractions themselves. That is, she opens her mouth with chokhmah. That is revelations of godliness. And the Torah of love is on her tongue. And it says in Masechet Sota, Chazal teach, what is this speaking about? This Eshet Chayil, that is the Torah of love is on her tongue. Zeh halomed Torah almanat lalamda. This is specifically speaking about the person that he learns Torah for the sake of teaching it to others. Meaning the person that he has completely elevated himself above self-aggrandizement, above self-interest. And now his whole entire essence and being is bound up with only bringing good to others. That is the concept of the Tzaddik Emet, that he learns Torah not for himself anymore, but he learns Torah literally only so that he can reveal it to those who it's not with them. And in this sense, the Tzaddik Emet is the one who has the Torah Chesed, that it's on her tongue, because she herself is opening her mouth with the greatest chokhmah, that is, that she has figured out how to have revelations of godliness to those who are struggling the most, because that's the reason why he's learning. He's learning in order to bring it down to those people. She oversees the ways of her household. She oversees the ways of her household. For the tzaddik oversees the ways of his household, meaning how he should always conduct himself so that his light is never going to be extinguished. So that a vestige of this wisdom, meaning that the tzaddik Emet, his whole essence is not just that he's able to bring down his wisdom in his generation for those people who are struggling, but in fact, he does it in a way that it's going to be with us forever. Like Rav Natan understood when he learned by Rabbi Nachman, and they say about what was it about Rav Natan, Rabbi Nachman's main student, that, so to speak, stood him apart and what allowed him to be able to receive the light of Rabbi Nachman in a greater way than even his others, the other students of Rabbi Nachman, who in some ways were higher level learners or had achieved higher levels of prayer, and yet Rav Natan achieved by far the highest level of all of those students, to the extent that he was able to give it over to us right now in Likutey Halachot in a way that we can understand. And the reason they explain is because he was the only one who really, truly chapped that the greatness of Rabbi Nachman was that his teachings were for everybody. That his teachings were not just for everybody, but they were for all time. And because Rav Natan realized that specifically he had the foresight to see that even though these teachings were going to help us now, meaning him in his lifetime. And those students of Rabbi Nachman at that time, he saw through his prophetic understanding that when would these teachings be the most salient? When would these teachings be the most important and most vital? Specifically before the coming of the Mashiach. That when the exile, the tokef, the strength of the galut would be the most intense, when Hashem would be completely concealed in the world, that it would be at this time, paradoxically, that Rabbi Nachman would be the most known throughout the world and his teachings would be the most necessary. And it was that koach of Rav Natan to foresee that, that he was able to have such Mesir Nefesh to get these teachings out to the world, knowing and understanding that in the future, 200 years from then, they would be needed now more than ever. And this is all actually pre-understood by the Tzaddik himself, that he made his teachings in a way that they would be most relatable, not even in his generation, but at the end. But lechem atzlut lo tachel. His bread and his Torah are not the bread of laziness, of idleness. Ki lachmo v'torato enu lechem atzlut. His bread and his Torah are not the bread of idleness, chas v'shalom. Ki haya zariz me'od me'od b'avato yiparach. Because his whole essence is, he has tremendous alacrity in trying to serve Hashem. That Rabbi Nachman was known not for ever sitting still. He was constantly moving, constantly growing. That they said whenever they saw him, he was never the same as he was the last time he saw him. Because he was, so to speak, in this intense spiritual cocoon that he was constantly elevating from level to level to level to level, to the extent that it wasn't even internal, that you literally saw every time you saw him, Rav Natan said, that he was not the same person. Rav Natan actually said a beautiful thing, something amazing, that when Rav Natan wrote the biography of Rabbi Nachman, he called it Chaya Moran. He called it the life of our master, Nachman. However, when he wrote his own autobiography, he called it Yemot Moranot, the days of our master Natan. So Rav Natan says in the beginning of his own autobiography, why is it that for the Tzaddik Yesod Olam, for Rabbi Nachman and Fega, our master, I called it the life of our master, but for me, his student, the one who would be the harbinger of those teachings, I called it the days of our master, meaning referring to myself, the one who would bring Rabbi Nachman's teachings to the world. Days versus the life of. He said, because all of my days of my life culminate into one life. That I have fallen and risen many times in my life. And ultimately, through my not giving up and through my attachment to Rabbi Nachman, I've able at the end of my life to say I have achieved a full life. So therefore, these are the days of me, because they culminated in a lifetime. But my master, Rabbi Nachman, he didn't, his days of his life didn't culminate in one life. But in fact, he said every single moment that Rabbi Nachman was alive, he had new life. That you literally saw every time that you saw him, came in contact with him, he was actually a brand new human being. His revelations were brand new. His being was brand new. The way that he expressed himself was brand new. He was a chidush. He was literally a novelty, in the sense that anytime you saw him, he was a brand new, like a phoenix. That every time you saw him, he was like a fire that was coming out of the darkness and a brand new revelation. So therefore, I had to call him the life of Rabbi Nachman, because all of his days were really new lifetimes. So this is a very deep thing. What is he alluding to? He is alluding to the fact that his Torah is never stale, meaning that it's always brand new. Alken kamu v'nei havashrura. That is, her children and her children rise and they praise her. Meaning, hem talmidim shnikraim banim shekervam l'Hashem yiparach. These are her students, us. That the Tzaddik has drawn us close to Hashem when nobody else could. And that's the reason why you see that Rabbi Nachman's students have such praise, have such gratitude, have such reverence and commitment to their tzaddik, to the Rebbe, that we speak about him in a way that when other people hear it, they think, why do we talk about him in a way that we don't speak about anybody else? Why does it sound like there's such an intense attachment to one person when there's so many tzaddikim? And the answer is because the tzaddik Emet is different. That the woman of valor, specifically her children, because they're so indebted to her, because she herself sacrificed herself so much to give to her children in a way that nobody else did, or nobody else was able to, so too we owe all of our existence to her being. Because until we have Hashem, we don't really exist. And it was only through the koach of the tzaddik that we were capable of doing this. That also her husband praises her. That Hashem Yipurach also is maskim. Just like the banim, just like the children and the boys and the girls, the sons and the daughters are praising this woman of valor, the mother. So too the husband as well, meaning Hashem Yipurach, is praising this mother who has weaned all of us, who has given birth to all of us and then nourished us. Ki Hashem Yipurach maskim al zeh. He's maskim on all of this. Ki chafetz bazeh shekarev kulam elav. Because he approves of this devotion to the tzaddik. And he approves of the devotion of the tzaddik himself. Ki chafetz chesedhu. Because Hashem desires love. This is like it said about Yosef when his brothers tried to place him into a pit. And before that, they saw Yosef coming. And the simple text of the Torah seems to say that the brothers said when they saw Yosef, let's see what happens to his dreams now. Because they planned to make it that nobody would ever hear from Yosef again. However, Rashi says there, and Rashi is shocked, he's the simple explanation, meaning we didn't read it right. He says it wasn't the brothers who said, let's see what happens to his dreams now, that it was actually the Shekhinah. It was Hashem himself who was saying that even though the brothers were plotting to kill Yosef, meaning to make it that nobody wants to learn his teachings, that we put him in Cherem, and that anybody who learns those teachings, we consider that person to be insane or fanatical or off his rocker, that Hashem himself says, let's see what happens to his dreams. Meaning that in the end, it doesn't really matter what you think, because I, Hashem, am maskim to him, because I desire chesed, that I want my children to come home. And therefore, in the end, it doesn't really matter what his brothers feel about his teachings, because Hashem is maskim to them. And he's the one who's going to bring the revelation to those dreams. Like it said about Yaakov Avinu's father, that even though he rebuked his son in front of his brothers so that they decreased their hatred for him, meaning that it caused his son to suffer, so that his brothers would not be overpowered by the intensity of Yosef. At the same time, it's explained that in the Torah, literally explicitly, that Hashem was waiting for those dreams to come true. And we know that in Kabbalah, in the Zohar, Yaakov Avinu is always embodying Hashem himself, whereas Joseph is always embodying the tzaddik. So when it says that Yaakov was waiting for those dreams to come true, meaning that Hashem was waiting for those dreams to come true. Because Hashem, meaning Yaakov, desires love. He desires chesed. Rabot banut asu chayo va'at alit al kulana. And this is what it means that many women have excelled, but you have surpassed them all. Meaning this is the praise of Hashem to the tzaddik himself. And Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow we're going to finish this halakha that's related to the tzaddik. And we're going to move on to a new section, Bezrat Hashem. Tomorrow we're going to speak about his dream of the sun and the moon and the stars, which is very, very beautiful. And encapsulates everything that we've learned so far. So does anybody have any questions from today's lesson? I see on the bottom here. Go ahead. Someone want to say something online? David, before you say something, I just want to see if there's questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for the class? Is it okay if I read this comment out on the bottom? Okay, I'm assuming because they put on the chat, it's for everyone. Oh no, it was a direct message. Okay. This person from the iPhone who said that they learn every day and they hide that they're learning. Can I say this out loud to the class, or is this just for me? Okay. So it says, I learn every day and I hide that I'm learning because my family doesn't like it or understand it. I sometimes get ridiculed so much for the connection I have to learn, as if I'm doing something bad, God forbid. I don't say anything. I just hope my family sees the love I have and wants it for themselves. I learn in the hopes to share one day. I just don't understand why Hashem would want it to be such a fight. I can't question that. Okay, so this is a very important point. This is something that everybody experiences when they begin to learn the teachings of Rabbi Nachman specifically, and the Torah in general. And that is that they see that those around them really, really ridicule them in a very overt way. Now, the reason for this is actually because this is what allows you to get those teachings. So this is very paradoxical, because in paper, these teachings are going to save you. So if these teachings are going to save you, you need a counterforce that is, so to speak, preventing you from being able to access these teachings and living with them like that, because otherwise you have no bechira, you have no free will, and you need to be able to choose to grow, to be able to choose to elevate. So how do you have choice? You need some type of opposition. And Rabbi Nachman says that opposition actually comes in the form of people, place, and things, friends and family, that they themselves will actually create that opposition, but that you must know that this is actually a sign of the greatness of the thing that you're doing. It's not a sign to stop doing it. Now, ultimately, if you don't give up on it, and not just in learning it, but in actualizing it and bringing it into your life and living with it, then years go by, and when it becomes a part of your actual being, and the joy that comes from it, the peace that comes from it, the faith that comes from it, the smile that comes from it, then as a result of that, those around you will gravitate. Just like with Yosef, that in the beginning, everyone is fighting against Yosef and is opposing to what he's trying to do, and so to speak, his children as well, those who are connected to him. But ultimately, when the famine hits, and it's going to hit, and they have no answers, and they see that you're happy in the midst of all of it, then they will start to open up to what it is that you do. But that's only later on. The way in which to deal with this challenge that is most intense, especially for those students of Rabbi Nachman, is to look at the introduction to the second part of the Likutey Moharan. And he explains there that there's a pasuk, it says Avraham Echad, that Avraham was one, meaning the first Jew, he was one. So what does Rabbi Nachman say it means that Avraham was one? So he explains there what it means is that Avraham, this first Jew, he was one with Hashem. That his entire paradigm of life, his entire orientation to life, is that there was only him and Hashem. And that even all of his friends and all of his family, all of his peers, all of the people in his generation were merely vehicles to that relationship with Hashem, either in the way of helping him to get closer, or creating a type of veil, or a type of veneer, or a type of concealment, a type of opposition towards me doing it. But either way, the way that I perceive those people around me, and even friends and family, and he says even spouses and even children, is to understand that in fact, they are still reflections of your relationship with Hashem. It's not that I have a wife, I have a husband, I have children, I have a spouse, I have parents, I have friends, I have people in my generation, but in fact, that there's only me and Hashem. That Avraham Echad, that I'm one with Hashem. And therefore, my whole orientation to life is, how do I get closer to Hashem? And everybody that's in my life is there for the purpose of helping me do that. And this is a paradox, because we're saying that in fact, that happens through the opposition of those people who are closest to us. But in fact, it's through that opposition that we achieve this intense closeness. So therefore, to know that because they are anti, or because they oppose, they are mitnagid this, it's not a sign that you should stop. It's not a sign that you should give up. It's actually a sign that what I'm doing is the truth. Now, obviously, if you're doing something that's unhealthy, or you're connecting to like a cult, and you see everybody around you is concerned, so there's good reason for it. But if you're literally connecting to a person or to teachings from a spiritual master whose whole entire essence and being is getting you to do what the Torah says, right? That Rabbi Nachman says that what does it mean to be a chassid of me? That you keep the entire Shulchan Aruch, that you do what the Torah says. So there's no stira between Rabbi Nachman and the Torah. It's not like he created a new religion. His whole essence and being is to get us to be able to keep the mitzvot with joy, with love, with happiness, with unity, with feeling of connection and oneness, and it's genuine. So there's nothing bad here. So if that's the case, then what's all that opposition? So the answer is the opposition is a sign that you're onto the real thing. And therefore you need to, so to speak, Rabbi Nachman say, you need to tap into the Avraham Avinu within you, that you're echad, that you're one with Hashem, and that you need to live with Hashem. And understand that even though this opposition is so intense and it increases the more that you try and get close to this real thing and live with it, ultimately, if you don't give up on that, and I can attest to this in my life, and I know that every Breslover Chassid, every student of Rabbi Nachman who doesn't give up on this journey can attest that in the beginning, the first few years are very difficult. And those people around them, even those ones who care the most about him, they scoff at it, they schlag it. However, if you don't give up on it, but it doesn't mean that you fight with them. It doesn't mean that you're obnoxious. It doesn't mean that you force it on them. It means you literally do everything you can to internalize it and live with it. Then ultimately what's going to happen is the truth always stands. And when people ultimately see that it's genuine for you and you never gave up on it, and they see all the beautiful fruits that came from it, and then you have a sense of inner peace and tranquility despite all of the darkness of the world, it's at that point that those around you will become asking to you. Well, this is what I believe, but it's so difficult. My husband doesn't like that I dress modest. It's as if everyone is against me and I'm going against the grain, but this makes so much sense. Yes, it's very difficult. Okay? You need to do your best, though, while you're doing it, that you don't alienate others. Every Baal Tshuva, and I'm not just speaking about people who are, they weren't religious and now they are. Even a person who comes to Rabbi Nachman's teachings and he was not connected to them before, he's a Baal Tshuva as well. So you need to do it in a way that you do your very best to continue doing what you need to do, but at the same time, you don't alienate any those people around you. That you do it with joy, you do it with happiness, you do it with a smile on your face. You explain why you're doing it, not with anger, not with resentment, not with this feeling of heaviness, but that you do it with lightness, you do it with joy. Because in the beginning, usually what we end up doing, and I know this well, is because we're fighting for this thing, so that fight pours out of us. And even though we mean well, so to speak, we do it with a sense of goodness, we do it with around us. So try your very, very best. And this is why it's important in your Boda do that you should believe in what you're doing. And you don't need to, so to speak, fight on the outside for it. You don't need to fight with those around you. You need to fight on the inside for it. And on the outside, Hashem should allow you to explain what you're doing with joy, to explain what you're doing with confidence in what you're doing, not to feel threatened by other people not agreeing or not believing with it, and praying to Hashem that they should be able to see that good. Any other questions before we sign out?
Rabbeinu, I was trying to say before we continue, like Sophia Halichot Beta Velechem Atzul Lo Tochel means like the idleness of the bread should not eat or something.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to say, like, what we are learning that's important for a person must be Zerizim Makdimi, like a person supposed to do everything with Zerizut. The more
Right.
a person who does everything with Zerizut, the more schar he'll get. The more
100%.
schar he'll get.
Yeah, Rav Natan actually said earlier in the Likutey Halachot, based on something that Rabbi Nachman teaches, very, very beautiful. Thank you, David. That that what is the surest sign that a person is growing in their emunah? If they're growing in their zerizut, meaning that they are naturally desiring to achieve doing the mitzvot with more alacrity. That the more that they want to go learn, to go pray, the more they want to go help Jews, the more they want to go do the mitzvot and to makayim them, to achieve them in their life, to go closer to Hashem, in a way not of, let's say, a lethargy, in a way of like, oh, here we go, but the more that it becomes, so to speak, I'm running after it. So this is the surest sign that your emunah is growing. In the beginning, you have to force yourself because you're not at that point yet. You don't have emunah yet like that, and you have to, so to speak, you have to act before you believe. However, Rabbi Nachman says that a servant who serves his master with alacrity ultimately is going to become like a child who serves their father with love. So ultimately, with not giving up on it, Hashem will give you real emunah, and then you're going to be able to, Bezrat Hashem, do it with emunah as well. Okay, everybody have an amazing day. Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. we're going to finish this halakha with Hashem's help, and then tomorrow night we will continue Likutey Moharan. We started last night this beautiful lesson on Purim about simcha, about dancing and hand clapping, and to see what the spiritual deep rectifications that come with this external form, manifestation of joy that comes through the clapping of hands and dancing. Everybody have an amazing day.